Hi, this is Maria Hill from Sensitive Evolution. Today I'm going to talk to you about the Emerging Sensitive Program. I've been asked a number of times what it's all about, and it's a rather large foundation program for sensitive people, and it doesn't lend itself to just a few words, so I thought I'd take a little time to explain more about it. It started about 5 years ago. Once I finished my website, my first website, I did a survey, and almost 600 people responded to it, which was great. The issues they raised as their needs seemed to be very much around the basics in life of work and relationships and how to live in this world. It seemed to me that there was a need for some kind of a foundation program so that sensitive people could be much more comfortable and more confident in the world. And so that's what I started to create, not only the content, but I experimented with a lot of different formats, platforms, ways to deliver the material to sensitive people. And over time, it's evolved into what it is now, which is a year-long program using 3 frameworks to help sensitive people feel confident about their ability to live well in this difficult world we live in. So I wanted to get started by talking about a saying that I have, which is there are the problems you have to have, and then there are the problems that you do not have to have. And I try to remind myself about that every so often. And it's basically all it means is that, if you're decide you're not going to brush your teeth, for instance, eventually you'll have problems and it will take time and money for you to fix them. And so by not brushing your teeth, you're creating a problem you do not have to have. And that interferes with the problem that you do have to have, which is your own personal development. So in essence, you're cheating yourself out of some new possibilities in life. And that's not something that we want to do. Now, we all have to figure out what to do with our time and energy. But for sensitive people, it's particularly challenging. We connect with all different kinds of energy thanks to our ever-engaged nervous systems. But because we're aware of something does not mean we know what to do with it. Do we engage or not? How do we engage? What is our objective? So, we don't always know how to tell the difference between a problem we have to have and a problem we don't have to have. We may not have the perspective to make wise decisions or create smart strategies. Because if we do not know much about the history or the context for the energy we're encountering, it can be difficult to make wise choices about what to do, and that can leave us feeling uncertain about ourselves. And when that happens, we take a hit on the inside. We cannot tell if we're failing someone or ourselves a lot of the time, and that can leave a lot of feeling of unresolved, feeling of things not being resolved. That kind of stays with us, sticks to us. So that experience, if we repeat it over and over again, that will ultimately destroy our confidence. And that does happen to sensitive people. Another issue we have to contend with is that we may lack the skills and experience, so that even if we see something and think that we need to take action, we may lack some of the skills we need to be effective. And lack of experience can affect our social standing and the chance that we'll be taken seriously. So there are consequences for being marginalized, and that can be one of them. So it's hard enough in our world, which is challenging, to be heard, but when you're sensitive, it can be even more challenging, since we do not live from the same place that non-sensitive people do. So not only do we have to figure out what we're seeing and what to do, but we have to deal with our experience of invalidation as well as any holes in our personal growth. Now, everyone has holes in their personal growth. We're all works in progress. But nonetheless, there are issues that come up, and they do have to be dealt with. And all of these things can be obstacles to being fully present and effective in our lives. And it can feel like we have a second or third job to process everything. And that's not necessarily activity that we feel we necessarily benefit from. So we can develop a strong ambivalence about taking action in our lives. All of the energetic dissonance and invalidation can drag us down. Now, there's always risk, and the energy that we sensitive people come in contact with can create a lot of risk for us, especially today because everything is so intense. How do you know what is a distraction and what is not? In our entertainment-rich, social media-driven world, the reality is that not everything matters. The volume of information alone is enough to overwhelm us and make it difficult to make assessments about what we are encountering. How do you know how to figure out what's important or not? How do you know what kind of distraction you may be dealing with and its purpose? How do you know what's relevant? People have their mindsets, which result in their attaching significance differently. If you ask different people what matters and how they define priorities, they will answer according to their mindset. As a result, you cannot simply assume that what individuals say is relevant, and that's what is relevant in the present. What's the most urgent? And I use that word urgent with some reservation, because I'm not just thinking about a crisis, I'm thinking about what's important. And I'm not saying this to dismiss people's point of view. It's a recognition that there is often more to what we consider relevant and important than what we perceive, and that's true of all of us. Certainly, when we notice unspoken and unacknowledged energies, we discover this. So how do you deal with all this perceptual complexity? And that's really what we're getting at here. Realizing all the potential differences in perception, who do you listen to? Different perceptions can be helpful or not. Even with a different perspective, an individual can be offering useful information or may have a more toxic mindset. How do you know that beyond the obvious forms of toxicity? How do you recognize healthy resistance from negative stonewalling and stubbornness? They're not necessarily obvious. If you do not have experience in a particular matter, whose opinion or perception do you decide to trust? The person with the most likes, the most degrees, the greatest fame? I think we can do better. Whatever choices you make, you want ideally to support your integrity and your authenticity so that at the end of the day you feel good about what you're doing and the decisions you're reaching. You want to have a positive impact and be serious about your contribution to the world. How do you define what's a risk and what is not? And how can you be confident about that? How can you do that with a volume of information and energetic perceptions to process and still have a life? Given that we have so much that we have to process, it can be hard for us to do that thoroughly and still feel like we have time for a life. So in addition to risk, there's always the issue of risk-taking. Assessing risk and taking risks are two different things. If you're sensitive, which we are, we're at risk because we approach the world differently and see things that others do not. We're usually a challenge to build bridges to the non-sensitive world, not only because of perceptual differences, but also because of our experience. It can be difficult to lay claim to the serious attention of someone who participates in the non-sensitive frame of reference. We are often seen as lacking gravitas. It can be difficult to communicate in a way that lets us be received with respect. So we can feel that we have little social standing and that we are risking it when we want to take action. The feelings are not without merit, but there is something we can do to minimize this kind of natural insecurity. Another big issue we face in communicating with the non-sensitive world is figuring out what is appropriate. Sometimes the problem we're seeing is not really ours, and we need to know that. Other times, timing could be an issue. In addition, we may have ideas that are good, but they may not be workable for a number of reasons, like time, resource constraints, and any number of factors that can limit our ability to be successful in getting buy-in for an idea. So how can we be smarter about these kinds of issues? Juggling all the differences and issues of a complex, fast, and intense world is hard enough for anyone, and even more challenging for sensitive people. Sensitivity to nuance and depth of processing have their requirements if they are to be put to use successfully. The extremes in our world make our processing harder and also make it harder for us to be present. We have more to process at a time when we're expected to move quickly, and that is often not something we can do well. So we can feel incompetent or think of ourselves as a disappointment, or even feel defeated by a world run amok. Having a sensitive experience means you're not having a non-sensitive experience. How do you bridge the gap between the sensitive and non-sensitive worlds? It's unrealistic to expect non-sensitive people to become more sensitive, although I certainly wish I had a magic wand and I could do that. And I also don't think most sensitive people want to be less sensitive, just more comfortable with being sensitive. Understanding frameworks makes it easier to figure out how to connect with the non-sensitive world so sensitive gifts can take their much needed place in the world. So in my opinion, there's a missing link for us. Sensitive people have a direct connection with energy, and so they do not drown in it. They often seek a big picture perspective to help them deal with everything that they're encountering, and often that big picture perspective comes with very strong spiritual values as a way to guide our actions. This is certainly a positive step, and it works sometimes and for some situations and with some people, but it is not always a complete understanding of what's going on. So sometimes we make mistakes in our understanding of the lay of the land, and that can create mistakes in our relationships and in other areas. Now, non-sensitive people have a stronger cultural connection. Culture is where we manifest, so we all need to relate to it and find a way to be part of culture because we're not really able to manifest without it. So that may seem like bad news, but when you understand the various cultural systems and their purposes, it becomes much easier to find your way in the world. So you get much more clarity, and that will help you with all of your actions. So if we want to manifest, which I call Middle Earth here on this chart, we need to have some understanding of how the world works. And the way we do that is with roadmaps. They're also called frameworks and patterns, and I use these phrases interchangeably. Now, for our purposes in the Emerging Sensitive course, they're the intersection between sensitive energies, human history, and human development, as culturally anyway, values, and individual personal development. So frameworks are like a skeleton. So the skeleton of the body, for instance, is a framework of a sort, and it provides a structure, but we never confuse the skeleton of our bodies with the person ourselves. And frankly, roadmaps and frameworks, they basically have that same kind of purpose. They give us a structure, but they don't live our lives for us. They also offer us markers around, at least from the cultural standpoint, but also from the personal development standpoint, around values, purpose, identity, and expectations, showing us how life and actions are defined under different conditions. With this tool, your mind has a place to go, which is one of its important purposes. A reality check, which when you're encountering complex energies, they offer you the opportunity to make up your mind, independent of what everybody else thinks, but with the perspective that makes mindful connection and constructive action possible and even more likely. Our frameworks are holistic, so they take complexities into account. And so you're not just imposing a model on the world, you're working with the human models that have been created and learning how to do so effectively. All the sensitive gifts become exceptionally valuable, and sensitivity to nuance becomes a rich source of information and possibility. And this can only improve your confidence. We use 3 different and related frameworks or building blocks. They become supports for us. One is on culture. The next is on soul-based development, or it's also called the nature-based development model. And the third is co-creator skills. These 3 frameworks are like a set of developmental steps that show up in cultural systems, the steps of individual development, and the skills we need to assume a fully mature co-creator relationship with the world. So in the course, we allow each to offer their perspective and support us to help us sort out our energetic perceptions and experience so we can have greater awareness and clarity at the same time. So they each contribute something, and we spend a lot of time going deeply into them to help us become stronger in using them. One of the most important things we do is a synthesis of the 3 frameworks by understanding not only the patterns and the roadmaps, but we also connect our energy and experience with them through stories, archetypes, and shared experience. We take deep dives into new models around weakness and control, and that's just 2 of them, for greater understanding, and also fleshing out what it means rather than taking superficial definitions of weakness, for instance. We try to have more nuance around them by having a deeper model about it. And we also work on sensitive issues like boundaries, and that's naturally a part of the program when you're working through the various steps in the process. This is a very insight-driven course. You're able to go at your own pace. It's a lifetime course, so we have people that come back over and over again. and you have the opportunity to sort out messaging, experiences, and those things that you ruminate about, so your mind is freer to support you in creating a joyful life. I've put together a few testimonials, just so you can get other people's words about their experience. Um, the first one: we are all conditioned to fit in and conform. However, we're created to reform and redefine what it means to be human. Creating is all about expressing our own unique self. Maria's course material and coaching provided me with knowledge and safety to stop the resistance and move into the awareness of my being. From Tammy. Yeah, you're able to reframe your experiences using not just, you don't want to be, when you reframe it, you don't want it to be wishful thinking. So you're able to reframe using these models, and it shows you, it kind of puts into relief where there may have been a mistake. And so therefore you're able to say, okay, that really wasn't true, and you can let go of something, and that's really helpful. The Emerging Sensitive course provided me with a new way of looking at myself and others based on human evolution. It helped me feel more understanding and less judgmental of both myself and others. It also increased my confidence in my HSP self and in my observation, thinking, and choices. That's from Hillary. And that's very important because you need the perspective, and without that perspective, our energetic information doesn't really work for us. But with that energetic information, and particularly because of our natural empathy, we're able to be less judgmental because we have the contexts for what's going on with people, and we can feel more comfortable about how we're going to respond to it. So it helps in so many different ways at so many levels. As an HSP, Robin says, I can't stress enough what a difference it made to my life to participate in the course. If you want to have a different perspective, if you want to have greater peace of mind and more confidence, the course will provide those things for you. Maria's deep knowledge of how highly sensitive people work is only paired by her kindness and willingness to listen. Yeah, we do a lot of listening in the course. We listen to ourselves. I listen to you, and we listen to each other when we're on our calls. So that's something that a lot of people enjoy, all the listening. And with the frameworks, you have an ability to listen to the world in a new way that isn't just from, your sensitivity or some of the woundings that you may have received by being sensitive. You have a different way of listening to the world that can actually take you out of the woundings, so you can feel much more confident and much stronger. You can live your value much more easily. Let me see. Maria's foundation course has helped me shine a more reassuring light on my sensitivity. This has helped me feel kinder to myself in the now, more positive about the past, and more hopeful for the future. Claire makes an important point here. When we go and understand the past, we understand not only the negative things, which we tend to be fairly aware of, all the violence in the past and is still in the present, but we also, and so we can say we're going to put that aside. That's not something we want. But we also see the positive benefits, how the past has provided us with building blocks, and we can see what's valuable and what's not. And it also helps us with our energies, because one of the things we do is we reclaim energies that we may have rejected, and we know why, and we know we learn more about feelings and how to work with our feelings better. So that is all part of sorting through, reframing, and reclaiming, and that is something that we do in the course as well. So you're able to be much more confident, much more positive about the past, and much more hopeful for your future, because you can see where your future lies and where you can contribute, and everything starts to make much more sense. And that's, for us, with all of the energy confusion that we can have, making sense of the world is, without having to be totally bogged down and rigid and uptight about that, that can be really important. And Regina says the Emerging Sensitive course is a great way to meet like-minded souls around the globe. We have people from all over, and who enjoy each other's company, and hopefully you'll be interested in joining them. So this is our last slide. It's about the program itself. So I will just give you a brief overview of what it's all about. So there are 12 separate monthly programs. It runs a whole year. Um, every single week, every month has a theme, and every single week has at least 5 pieces of information, a combination of videos, audio, some insights, some articles, building on that theme for the month. In addition, we have courses on culture and soul-based development. For the first 10 months of the year, it's a theme for the whole year, but the specific courses on culture and soul-based development run from January through October. And on top of those, because November we do manifesting and December is a wrap-up month. And so in addition to those courses on culture and soul-based development, we have additional courses on sensitivity, on Ayurveda, on work for sensitive people, and manifesting, as I mentioned, in November. And on top of all of that, we have 2 recorded talks every month. And that's comes from me synthesizing the information so you can see how someone actually works with it. And it's also where I put in more information on models like weakness, as I mentioned. We do deep dives into various subjects like freedom, for instance. Authoritarian personality is another one. I mean, there are lots of different investigations throughout the course to help you have a way to use your sensitivity to nuance in a way that's more valuable for you. So we're always adding to the skeleton of these frameworks, so you have rich material to draw on when you're out in the world. In addition, we're adding 2 discussion calls every month. They're probably going to be on the weekends. And we're going to be using at least 1 movie per month, and we'll be using other material as well to have discussions so that we can start to share our experience and explore the various frameworks and how to use them. And we'll talk about using skills and how we can perhaps put things to work, because I'm always interested in hearing those kinds of issues. We have a private Facebook group as well where people can share. So we start with an overview, which is basically the skeleton, and we do that so that your mind has a place to go. Once you have that kind of big picture, then we start adding knowledge month by month so you can understand more about differences with people. You can understand more about the various skills that go into, like being present, intuition, creativity, those kinds of skills, those building blocks. We talk about emotions. So we start to build after we go into the overview, which starts in January. So I'm adding a link with this additional material for you to investigate on my website, and I hope you find this useful. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll be happy to talk with you, and I look forward to seeing you in the course.